I'm Jim Carney.
I'm Linda Hirsch.
And this is EdCast, a program created and produced by educators for everyone interested in education.
According to data analyzed by the New York City Comptroller's Office, just 21% of New York City public school students complete a 2- or 4-year college degree within 6 years of graduating high school. These figures might challenge our notion of New York City's supremacy as the intellectual capital of the U.S. Today, Comptroller John Liu joins us to discuss his Beyond High School initiative and why the Comptroller believes that increasing the percentages of New Yorkers with post-secondary degrees is crucial to the city's long-term economic stability and prosperity.
What role should colleges play in ensuring that students are ready for a secondary education? And what can be done to retain students and guide them along to get their degrees? Later in the program, I'll talk to City University of New York Executive Vice Chancellor Jay Hershenson. We'll discuss what CUNY is doing to assist with the preparation of students to enter college and what CUNY is doing to keep them. But now, let's join Linda and the Comptroller in the studio.
My guest today is New York City Comptroller John C. Liu, who has recently released a report entitled Beyond High School, Higher Education as a Growth and Fiscal Strategy for New York City. Welcome to EdCast, Comptroller Liu.
Great to be on, Dr. Hirsch.
Your report outlines your plan to increase the number of New Yorkers with college degrees. Why this initiative now?
Well, I think we all understand how important college is. If you ask anybody across all different backgrounds, racial, economic, otherwise, people understand that in today's economy, a college education is almost becoming a minimum to not only get ahead, but to even get in. And so we really need to focus on college education in the city of New York. We looked at, there's a lot of emphasis on high school graduation rates.
Right, and your report looks at that. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Well, we look at high school graduation rates, but we see that if we extend that analysis to New Yorkers with college degrees, we find that we're in the middle of the pack. We're not doing very well compared to other major American cities. The point is, it's not about exactly who's ahead of us. It's that we are in the middle of the pack. And I don't believe New York City should ever be in the middle of the pack of anything, let alone educational achievement and qualifications, especially for the modern day workforce. So we've looked at the college graduation rates, and we find, and this shocks a lot of people, only 1 out of 5 New York City public high school students wind up getting a college degree.
So that was interesting.
And we define college degree as either a 4-year or even a 2-year degree after 12 years of entering high school. A generous allotment of 6 years to graduate from high school and another 6 years to attain some kind of college degree. So even with those generous terms, it's still only 1 out of 5 high school students.
And I think your report mentioned that whereas 48% of our high school students may actually enroll, only that 1 in 5 actually end up getting the degree.
That's correct.
So we're losing people along the way. Now, your initiative, as I said earlier, really contextualizes this in terms of a long plan for the city in terms of its growth. And you use the term investing in human capital, which I thought was really interesting. So talk to us a little bit about why you think this is so important, not only economically, but in terms of human capital.
Sure. Well, I have the privilege of serving as the city's comptroller. So we often look at things through the prism of economics and how it affects our fiscal status for the city. There's a lot of reasons why we have to focus on college degrees and to do so in economic terms. Number one, we've got to maintain not only our competitiveness, but our viability going into the future. If we're in the middle of the pack of other cities in America, and that doesn't even start to look at what major global cities in other countries are able to do, we're going to fall behind. We're not going to be, New York City is in my unbiased opinion, the greatest city in the world. We're the largest American city by far. We cannot be in the middle of the pack when it comes to educational achievement. So to maintain economic competitiveness and viability, we've got to make sure we have a well-educated modern-day workforce that is equipped to handle the needs and the job requirements of 21st century careers. College is a minimum when it comes to many of these situations. We also look at just, look at the tax base.
Right.
There's a very strong correlation
Okay.
between a college degree and higher income. It's almost assured that people who get a college degree, one form or another, will have a much higher chance of having a higher income. Now, I don't mean to define the need for higher education in terms of a stronger tax revenue base for the city of New York, but everything from just being overall, being competitive overall, to even looking at our tax base, and all the reasons in between. These suggest that education is the best long-term investment.
The tax base is a minor point in that it really is linked to the city's economy. The more people, as you point out in the report, paying taxes, contributing. And also, your report had mentioned that people with a college degree who attain more rely somewhat less on city services.
Yes, that's absolutely the case. So it's not only a stronger tax revenue base, but also perhaps some people might call it a more independent workforce.
A more independent workforce. That would mean, so for the long-term growth of the city, then you see this initiative as being crucial. Now, you mentioned a percentage. You want to increase the proportion of people with a college degree by a pretty large amount. Do you remember? I think 60%
yes,
maybe or something?
Well, first let me say that it's for the greater good of the city to have a much higher proportion of its residents having achieved college degrees. It's also much better for the individual. As I stated at the very beginning, you ask people how important college is, and no matter what racial background they are, what socioeconomic status they are, even people who they themselves did not get a college degree or college education, they feel that for their children it's of paramount importance to attain college education. And so it's important for the city, but it's also important for the individual and the families involved. Now, in terms of how we proceed into the future, we think that we have to have an ambitious goal, and we're looking to have 60% of city residents being holders of college degrees by the year 2025. It's ambitious. It's already 2012, almost 2013, and we're still at a very low rate. But 60% would put us towards the top rungs in terms of the national scale of how competitive cities are.
Now, in terms of that ambition, I mean, there's a persistent achievement gap in our schools right now, as you know, with white and Asian students outperforming Black and Latino students. CUNY says that many of our city public school graduates come to CUNY needing remedial work. Some of the CUNY colleges have raised their standards. And so how do you see us being able to accomplish this goal of having more and more people attain a post-secondary degree?
Dr. Hirsch, you bring up a very important question that is not just about secondary education or post-secondary education. I think we have to extend that to early childhood education.
Okay.
We have to level the playing field when it comes to the very beginning of the educational careers of kids. And I do believe that there are unfortunately still disparities, as you cite, but I don't think there's any good reason to have those disparities. I think if you look at, for example, people are there's a wide consensus that we need much stronger early childhood education. Early childhood education where not only kindergarten is mandated, but even pre-kindergarten. And yet, it's the parents who are in the most difficult socioeconomic situations that find it very difficult to send their kids to, for example, pre-kindergarten. We've got to level the playing field starting at age 4 or age 5. Not wait until junior high school, intermediate school, or high school to start talking about college to these students. And then, and so start at the beginning, but take it all the way through all the years, through primary school, through intermediate school. When we get a student into high school, I believe that student should be geared up, ready to go to college, to think about what schools they want to apply to. Today, we don't set the bar that high. We allow many of our new high school freshmen to think that they are in all likelihood not going to college, and so they resign themselves to the fact. No, we shouldn't allow any 9th or 10th graders to think that they're not going to college. Every one of these students should believe that they are going to college. If at some point, at the end of their high school days, it turns out they're not going to college, okay, we need to have some kinds of other training, vocational apprenticeship programs ready for them to jump into. But they shouldn't be already resigned to that fact.
College should be the expectation.
You put it best.
Okay.
Yes.
Jim Carney had the opportunity to speak to Jay Hershenson at CUNY to talk about how CUNY sees the role that it could play in helping you achieve some of the goals of this initiative. So let's take a look.
Jay Hershenson is the Senior Vice Chancellor for University Relations at CUNY. We chatted at CUNY's headquarters on Manhattan's Upper East Side.
I certainly want to commend the Comptroller and the Comptroller's office for producing a report that focuses on how best to assist many more students to graduate from high school. And I think that's a shared concern that we have with the Department of Education, with the city as a whole, especially in this economy. CUNY's role in terms of working with the public school system is historic. After all, the first president, the founder of City College was Townsend Harris, and he was the president of the Board of Education. So CUNY has been inextricably linked with the Free Academy, with City College, with CUNY since 1847. And there are many points along the way, as one looks at the history of CUNY, where this linkage has been evident. For example, after the GI Bill was passed following World War II, the federal government put a lot of money into teacher education. 70% of CUNY's first-time freshmen are graduates of the New York City public school system. So at any given point, our relationship is inextricable. In addition, on CUNY campuses, or contiguous to CUNY campuses, there are 20 public high schools that we are either as a system helping to operate or coordinate on the campuses themselves. And many of the high schools that are on CUNY campuses are also early college high schools, so the students get access to associate degrees. The CUNY system also has a program called College Now, which started in 1981, and that is a program to help high school students, usually in the 10th or 11th grade, gain access to college-level courses or receive some remedial assistance at the high school level to help them along the way. Today, there are 28,000 registrants in the College Now program that are coming through the New York City public high schools. That's about 20,000 actual students a year, and that's taking place at over 450 public high schools in New York City. That's unrivaled anywhere in the country.
Going forward, what are the challenges that public colleges face in meeting the needs of students coming out of public school systems, particularly here in New York?
Certainly the world has changed very much. A high school degree, in many ways, is no longer a minimum credential for entry into the workforce. The world has changed. We are seeing increasingly a very interesting phenomenon at CUNY. On the one hand, we're seeing many more high academic achievers come out of the public schools, come out of the private schools, who are attracted to CUNY. They're doing so because our reputation has increased enormously, and this is a very affordable system. So we're seeing record numbers of students with 85 averages or above. Our Honors College, of which Lehman College is a member, received 5,500 applications for 400 spots just this past year. So on the one hand, we're seeing more and more students who have options, academic options, turn to CUNY as their institution of first resort. On the other hand, we're seeing more and more students graduate from the New York City public school system, compared to years past, which is a good thing. Our freshman class has increased enormously over the years. In 1980, CUNY was serving 170,000 degree credit students. Today we're serving almost 270,000. So since 1980, CUNY's enrollment has increased by 100,000 students. So that's all very, very good news. On the bad news front, however, we're seeing, particularly at the community college level, we're still seeing substantial numbers of students who emerge from the high schools needing remediation. They have a high school degree, but they still need remediation. And when you ask, what are we doing going forward, the answer is that we're providing a free pre-freshman summer skills program so they can get the help needed before they start college in the fall. We're also sending a clear signal that remediation for those students has to take place immediately.
And what's the role of counseling? What role do counselors play in helping students become ready to go into college and complete their degrees?
I think that the Comptroller hit the nail on the head by focusing in on the importance of counseling. My son is in a public high school, and he constantly refers to his counselor and the advice and the support and the discussions and the strategies that they talk about. The counselor has a tremendous impact, and if their caseload is so great that they cannot see students enough on an individual basis or as a group, then the system is at a disadvantage. So ways need to be found to increase the availability of counseling. Within the CUNY system, we're putting a lot more emphasis on peer advisement and peer counseling, training successful students, successful graduates to be able to participate in peer advisement. That's a special area that our new community college is focusing on, and we're going to continue to grow those kinds of programs.
And now, back to Linda and Comptroller Lou in the studio.
Executive Vice Chancellor Hershenson makes a point about how important advisement is, and you were mentioning the high school student having the goal of wanting to go to college and working with advisors, and he also mentions how important advisement was. So what's your vision of how advisement and guidance may play a role in helping you achieve this initiative?
When we found that a shockingly low percentage of city high school students were actually obtaining some kind of college degree, we looked at why those were the what the reasons were. And we found one glaring gap in kind of the array of educational services we provide to our students. And that is that there's just not enough there aren't enough guidance counselors out there. We asked the students if they felt they had adequate access to a guidance counselor. The vast majority of them didn't think that they had access. We looked at the numbers. Did you know that the average guidance counselor has a caseload of 259 students? I mean, how is anybody going to effectively coach and lead 259 students through the college application process?
What would you want to see as a ratio?
We've proposed a more reasonable ratio of 100 students for each counselor. That's still a heavy caseload, but it's certainly much more manageable, and it's more in line with what other places are doing.
We had done a show recently on getting into college, and we had some students on. Some had gone to private schools and some were in public schools. And the public school students said they very rarely had access to good counseling, whereas the private school students said they did, that they had they had much more guidance in terms of college. But you know there's been a hue and cry already about this proposal in terms of how much it's going to cost. I know the DOE has said already, oh, what is he talking about? You know, that's so expensive. So where do you see us getting the money to put this in place?
Well, I just wanted to touch upon, expand upon what you just said before, which is going beyond the numbers of just understanding that there's a current ratio of 259 to 1. We looked at certain schools that had a much stronger track record of having its students ultimately graduate from college, and we found that the ratios were closer to 100 to 1.
Really?
So the qualitative analysis is there as well.
So how do we pay for it?
Yeah, that's always a great question. The DOE, anytime somebody other than the DOE has an idea, they bemoan the additional costs. More college counselors, and we're talking about doubling the number of college counselors or guidance counselors in our public high schools. That'll cost a lot of money. It'll be, the fiscal impact is about $176 million, which is not a negligible amount.
No, where do you see, where would we get
well,
that?
It's $176 million out of the Department of Education's budget, which exceeds $20 billion a year. So we're talking about less than 1% of the department's budget. But we're also looking at examples where the Department of Education did not use its money properly or spent money on expensive consultants on projects that wound up being very unproductive or in some cases useless.
Do you think they've spent too much money on testing?
Dr. Hersen, I hope you will have me back for another show to talk about
I can't resist
testing,
asking. I mean, a lot of money has been spent on testing.
Well, suffice to say for now, I think that the overemphasis on testing is not a service to our students.
Okay.
But we have examples where the DOE left $133 million on the table of money that should have been used for pre-kindergarten. That's certainly money that could have been that could have freed up. If those funds were secured, that could have freed up funds in other parts of the DOE's budget, so that they could have paid for more guidance counselors. We also find these a lot of so-called technology projects, an $80 million system called ARIS that ultimately was used by very few of the teachers and the principals that were supposed to use it.
So there could be more money available if it were used in a more prudent manner.
That's
Would that
correct.
be one way to say it?
Yes,
Now,
and it's not just about how does the DOE find $176 million. It's just that they need to understand this. The guidance counselors have to be moved up on the priority order, because if we want to get kids to not just graduate from high school, but graduate from college, we've got to give them the resources and the tools in order to see them succeed.
And actually, if they had a guidance counselor attached to them throughout their high school years, you know, we're even finding this at the college level, that we're making a much bigger push now to assign students, advisors, and counselors in the freshman year.
Right.
As a means of aiding retention, because as I said earlier, your study does point out that students enroll in college, and yet not many of complete.
That's right.
We go from 48% to 21%.
And I think some of what we found was that because the guidance counselors were not able to be as effective because of the huge ratios, they weren't able to kind of lead students into colleges that are appropriate for them. So that also contributes to the non-graduation rates as it relates to college.
In terms of the other kinds of programs that you might envision help so that we could actualize this initiative, you mentioned guidance counselors. Are there any other programs that you have in mind that are that we might currently use or expand upon to help students?
Well, we do list a whole host of
I know you mentioned College
remedies.
Now, which is a CUNY program.
Yes. Well, CUNY programs
And
are always...
high school. Yeah.
Yes. Any kind of partnership with CUNY, I generally find to be very cost effective and efficient. So we should be
we don't spend a lot of money on stuff.
We also made a number of other recommendations. There is a group of high school students out there who have had a great success in terms of their educational experience and the ability for them to apply to college. I'm trying to, the name of that organization escapes me right now, but it's all detailed in my report, which is online on my website, comptroller.nyc.gov. We list
We'll
half
put
a
it
dozen.
up later for you.
Thank you. There are half a dozen other recommendations in addition to increasing the number of guidance counselors in our public schools. And again, the emphasis is on college education, on obtaining college degrees.
We only have a few seconds left, if you can believe seconds. I want to ask you one question. As you look at what's happening in terms of the readiness of our students to move from high school to college, would you have any opinion on the effectiveness of mayoral control of our schools? Has it been effective? Hasn't it?
I think that as a member of the City Council, I was a supporter of mayoral control. I thought that it actually meant mayoral accountability. In the intervening years, the mayoral control started meaning less mayoral accountability, and I think it went down the wrong path. In 2009, the state legislature refined the notion of mayoral control to have more accountability, and let's see where it stands.
All right, and your final, we only have a few seconds left. What do you think is the most pivotal component in being able to put your plan into action?
Well, we obviously need the Department of Education to take a serious look at the report and not just talk about the fact that they don't have any money. They've got plenty of money. They've just got to raise the priority level. But we also want to raise the awareness in the public. The fact that we only have 1 out of 5 high school students graduating from college, and that we're not competitive when it comes to other major American cities. These are economic as well as educational imperatives that we have to take seriously, and we have to understand that education is really the economic development policy of tomorrow.
I think the report makes a very compelling case for that. And I want to thank you very much for joining us today on EdCast. It's been a pleasure to have you on the program.
It's been my pleasure,
Comptroller
Dr.
John
Hurst.
Liu. Don't go away. We'll be right back with our Ed Bites. Thank you. Welcome back to this edition of Ed Bites.
Last spring, we reported on poor student scores on the nation's civics test. A new report released by the Center for Information and Research on Civic Learning and Engagement finds not much has improved. In spite of the upcoming presidential election, most schools are not doing much to promote student interest in the election or provide civic education. Only 8 states have standardized tests in civics and U.S. government at the high school level, and only 21 states require students to take a social studies test. Since current standardized testing focuses on English and math, it appears social studies has been neglected. Is the answer more testing or less testing, but more coverage of the material? Let us know what you think.
Just how early can struggling readers be identified? Researchers at Stanford University claim that brain scans of children as young as 7 can give us clues to the development of reading skills. There appear to be neural differences in children who are accomplished readers and those who are struggling. The university says the findings are significant because a child's reading skills at age 7 can also predict reading skills 10 years later. Researchers are hoping to correlate the maturation of the brain's reading wiring to a child's acquisition of reading skills and ultimately develop early interventions for children who are poor readers.
Well, I guess if there's a lesson to be learned from today's show, it's that education and learning is a process. It starts in the very young, goes through middle school, high school, and up through college and secondary education.
And much of the research we reported on just now really relates to what our guests were saying today.
Well, that does it for this edition of EdCast.
Until next time, class dismissed.